Hi, it's Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO here in beautiful Montreal, welcoming you to another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. We're part of Fractional Pros Canada, the home for Canada's fractional community, and you can find us on Facebook. We bring you conversations about everything fractional that matters, for fractional executives and businesses from coast to coast. Think of this as your go-to spot for real talk, practical wisdom, and strategies you can actually use, all without the corporate fluff and with plenty of Canadian content. Whether you're a fractional pro or a business in our great country of Canada and beyond, this conversation is for you. Grab your espresso and let's dive in. Welcome to the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. I'm your host and fractional CMO, Robert Mendelson, here in beautiful Montreal. And from way down to the other end of the street, from Victoria, BC, we've got Pamela Potts. Pamela is a fractional CHRO, 25 years of senior HR leadership, and she specializes in helping mid-market technology and life sciences companies navigate the messy intersection of growth and structure. Today's episode is sponsored by the fractionalproscanada.ca directory. Scaling a business in Canada is hard enough without the high price tag of a full-time C-suite hire. Most CEOs that I'm talking to need high-level strategy to break through, but they don't want the overhead, the long-term risk, or the 6-month recruiting cycle. When they ask for a shortcut, I send them to the Fractional Pros Canada directory. It's the curated hub for vetted, high-tier fractional talent like Pamela, experts who step in, find the gaps, and deliver ROI from day one. Instead of digging through generic job boards, savvy leaders go where the specialists are already gathered. Business leaders, find your next strategic partner on the directory at fractionalproscanada.ca. At Fractionals, if you're not listed, you're effectively invisible to the Canadian leaders who are ready to hire right now. Don't just be open for business, be findable. Head over to fractionalproscanada.ca and get listed today. Pamela, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So interesting. You've spent a good part of your career not only on this side of the border, but south of the border as well. You've led people strategy on both sides. So I always love meeting people like you and asking the question, what's the biggest cultural difference you see, if any, between what's going on down there and what's going on up here?
I do see a really big difference, actually. The hustle culture is alive and well in the United States, and I think that the pendulum has swung a little bit too far to the side of hustle and not it's ignoring the pendulum side of humane. In my estimation. Obviously it's working for folks in the United States. They've got the largest economy in the world, and the innovation and all of that is really working. So I'd like to see the pendulum swing a little bit, but it's there's a decided difference between cultures in the United States and in Canada, at least in my experience.
So something's going right as far as the hustle, but something's going wrong as far as the human,
Yeah,
as it
yeah.
would be.
Yeah, I'd like to see it just nudge back a little bit. Yeah, yeah.
And what about up here? So the hustle is not as strong. Do you think there's more hustle needed up here, or do you think that we're at the point where if there's more hustle, then that human part is going to start to suffer?
It's always interesting to figure out how to strike that right balance, right? I do think that the cultures here in Canada are a little bit more humane. I do think that the innovation here, though, is incredible. The energy and enthusiasm around innovation, particularly in the life sciences space that I've been involved with, and the technology space, it's really exciting to be around. There's a lot of founders that are, doing some incredible work with some really great teams. So I think it's working.
Okay, that's good news. That's encouraging news.
Yeah.
And we could use a lot of good news these days. Um, so your background, again, very interesting. You're a CPA, you're a certified executive coach, and a longtime HR leader. So you've got the numbers expertise on one side, so to speak. You got the people expertise on the other side. Usually those two worlds don't mix very well or at all. In your case, you're a living example that either it's super noisy inside your head or things are okay. So
I'm happy to report that things are okay.
we're
Uh,
happy to hear that. Yes. Excellent.
and so that I don't get myself in trouble with the certifying body, I'm a former CPA.
Former CPA. All right.
Yes,
Noted.
yes, and yeah, I'm so grateful actually that I have that experience because it has served me so well in the HR space to have sort of that business numbers kind of a background. And to be honest, there's not a lot of people in HR who have that. Although I certainly have come across a number of people who have a similar background, and all of us have agreed that it is extremely useful. Yeah.
So what's that extra piece that you have from the CPA days that you bring in now into the HR roles that makes you, is it make you a better performer in what you do? Does it give you additional perspective? What is the actual advantage that it brings?
Yeah, so I think the advantage that it brings is I come to the HR space from the perspective of business. So I'm a business person first, and an HR person second. One of my number twos at one point in my past came to me and said, Pamela, we need to do this wellness program. And I said, great, give me the ROI.
Now that's the thing most people typically say is the first answer to those. The first answer is usually wellness, great. This is going to be great for the people, and eventually they'll get to the ROI question, or maybe they won't ever, and maybe the CFO is the one who's going to chime in on that. So that's really interesting. How does that play out in a corporate environment where somebody who's coming to you with that is probably not expecting to hear that from the head of HR?
Yeah, I think he was a little bit shocked, which I could understand. But it also got him thinking like a business person, like, I'm sorry, but we can't just show up here and just, with the flavor of the month and say, oh, this is the next direction that we should go. So we eventually did put a wellness program in place, but only because he did prove the ROI. He proved it with respect to turnover and, resilience and things like that. And hey, I'm all on board when there's the benefit of the business and the benefit of the people. And, when those two intersect, I'm all about it. And in fact, the company that I run now, which is Riser Leadership, the organizing inquiry that I use is, what becomes possible when business performance and human flourishing reinforce each other. Because in my experience, there's a lot of organizations out there that see that as an either or conversation. And in my mind, people love to win. So that business performance is really important to them, and not at the expense of their health and their time with their families and relationships that they have and so on. So how do we create that synergy where everybody wins?
One of the classic questions for the HR folks is always, you talked about ROI. How do you measure ROI? How do you measure if the people side of the business is doing good? It's easy to do it, on the sales and marketing side, but when it comes to measuring success of people, how do you measure that?
There's always going to be a subjectivity to it, Robert, that just is the nature of the beast, and you're not going to be able to get away from that. Having said that, I think that the HR world has gotten much better at accumulating data. And so there's a lot more focus on surveys and getting data that way. So, one of the organizations that I was a part of, we did an ENPS, like a net promoter score for employees. And the question that we used is, would you recommend this organization to a friend of yours, to work here? And we used the NPS mechanism, if you will, or scoring set to figure out what that number was. And we paid a lot of attention to that. Does that eliminate all of the subjectivity of that? No, it doesn't. But as I said, that's sort of the nature of things. But if you continue to measure something over the course of time, you begin to be able to see some trends. And I think that's what's very helpful.
Well, let's talk about something that a lot of fractionals struggle with, and that is how to brand ourselves, how to go to market. You and I have had a previous conversation where you were sharing, that you're sometimes struggling with, is a fractional CHRO, is a fractional CPO, and then you pointed out that, by the way, in the tech world, that P often gets mistaken for product instead of people, so, which
Yes,
which is very true, very true.
yes,
Um,
yes.
what do you think that the people function is still struggling to find its definitive label in the C-suite? What does that look like? How much has the importance of the people P come up over the last few years, or is it still a struggle to prioritize people in the C-suite?
Well, over the course of my own career, I have certainly seen a dramatic difference in how HR people are viewed. And I think when I first started, I think HR people were, in some regards, their own worst enemy because they would come and say, "Hey, let's do a wellness program," and people would kind of look at them and go, "What benefit is that going to have to the business?" So I think the HR folks have kind of learned over time that they can't be pure HR. They have to have a foot in both. They have to have the foot in the people and the foot in the business, and help provide guidance to the executive team around how to manage both. So, I think the experience that people had in, now 6 years ago in the pandemic really shone a spotlight on the importance of good people management and, the disruptions that are, they seem to be never ending these days and everywhere you look. So I think what we need to do now as HR people is we need to understand that the world has changed, the needs of the business have changed, the needs of the people have changed, and how do we, as HR staff, how do we help the business navigate through that increasing complexity, that increasing ambiguity, all of that change in a way that works for both for the business and for the people that are involved. And that's not just employees, it's also vendors, it's also customers. It's, I think sometimes people tend to forget that we're in business for the sake of people. And when
Perfect.
you lose, there's no business that exists that isn't somehow serving people. Because if you can't sell to a person, then you're not going to be in business very long. So what I think is every organization is eventually going to hit what I call an achievement ceiling. And that's the point where the leadership capacity that built the business, it's no longer able to process the complexity that the business is in. So, a chief people officer or a chief HR officer needs to work with the CEO and the rest of the leadership team to start to close that gap. And, you do that by redesigning what the leadership infrastructure looks like. And the other thing that I think is true right now as well is all of the systems, like the people systems, the processes, all of that, they were built for a different time. They were built for a time when efficiency was what was most important. And when you're in a stable environment, I think that makes great sense. But we're no longer in a stable environment. So those systems have to be redesigned, in my view, from the ground up to focus more not so much on efficiency but on ambiguity and complexity and adaptability and things like that. So I think that's the next place where HR staff and teams are going to be able to make a difference for the business, is to help them meet, the needs of where the organization is right now within the context of, the rapidly changing environment in which we're all operating.
You're reminding me of a time many moons ago when I had a business and I had a business partner who was significantly older than me, good 30 years, like another generation older.
Yeah.
And there was an item in the news at some point where there was, I can't remember who it was, but there was some company leader who announced that, in addition to, unpaid, not unpaid, unlimited vacation, unlimited sick days, they were also introducing a napping policy of some kind where they were encouraging, not only permitting, but encouraging employees to take, 20 minutes, go grab a nap in the early afternoon. They were setting up these little pods where you could go lie down. It was dark, et cetera, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera. And I remember that my partner at the time, my business partner, said, paying employees to sleep on the job? That's insane.
It's
And
ridiculous. Yeah.
right, how crazy is that? Now, I am a big fan of napping during every day. I I would say 5 days out of 7, I am doing the power nap thing sometime in the afternoon. I lie down, I fall asleep within a minute, and I don't set any alarms. I wake up within 15 to 20 minutes just automatically, and I'm ready to go for another 12 hours. It's the most amazing thing. So I'm a big proponent of that. But it's just the mindsets that there are and there were are really different. And as you said, most people's systems were built for a company that no longer exists.
It's true. Yeah. There was a member of my team. I love nothing more than to coach and mentor, the folks that work for me. And she was very, very focused. She was a recruiter and she was very, very focused on, perfection. And I said, like, we don't need perfection. The aim is excellence. And, I don't need you taking your laptop home during, just a normal time, right? I need you fresh for when, we have one of those peaks, right? So don't burn yourself out when we don't have a need for it. And it took me a year to convince her not to take her laptop home at night. But eventually she stopped taking it home at night on a regular basis. She would take it home when she needed to, but not every night as a matter of course. And she developed a fascination with marine animals. Here we are in Victoria, so there's marine animals all around us. And she volunteers at a local aquarium, and the level of innovation and the level of enthusiasm and the level of thinking that she brings to her work now is night and day
Hmm.
from when she was trying to operate up here all the time compared to, let's follow the natural rhythm of how people actually work. Yeah, people just can't go flat out like that. We're just not built that way.
I remember the first time I took a vacation without my laptop. It was not that long ago, and I took my tablet instead. So I'm not sure that was a success, but it was a baby step, I would say.
Yes,
So yeah.
yes, yes. Well done, Robert.
Thank you. I will keep working on that.
Uh,
So
Well, when you let yourself have an actual vacation and you detach, like you come back. It's like the one of the folks that I used to work for, the CEO, he would go away for a week for a month in the summer. And, his parting shot as he left was, if you have to make a decision, make it a good one. It's like-
nice. Love
and
that.
he came back and he was completely refreshed, and it was great. He had all kinds of new ideas and all kinds of new energy and things like that. And I think that's what people really need.
It's really interesting how people react to different situations. I remember working in a corporation a long time ago again, and the head of another division, all of a sudden that division like got some really bad news. They were like losing their biggest customer, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember the head
It's
of the
tough.
division, his name was Mike, and Mike he says, well, the best thing to do when there's a crisis, go on vacation. He's like, I'll see you in a week. he was clocking out. And the other thing is, I don't know if you know the band Weezer, but I read this about the lead of Weezer, who I believe writes all the songs. He said that every year he takes a full month and he goes off grid. He finds some little shack in the middle of some forest somewhere, and just
Mhm.
spends a month out there. And he says he needs that to recharge. He's not even out there like writing songs and stuff. He's just out there to get away from everything and do the full reset. Kind of an extreme reset, but
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
interesting how people find what they need in different forms.
It is interesting, isn't it? I always remember when one of my kids was 10, I was typing on the computer and he was watching me and I kept making mistakes and I had to back up. And in all of his 10-year-old wisdom, he said to me, "Mom, you might go faster if you slow down."
Ooh, wow, at 10?
At 10.
Wow.
And I've never forgotten that. He's 28 now. And, like that's so profound, right? Out of the mouths of babes. So I think that applies, right? Sometimes you have to slow down to speed up.
You might go faster if you slow down. I'm putting that on a billboard. That's awesome,
Yeah,
especially from 10-year-old. Yeah,
right.
it's interesting. Sometimes, yeah, like you said, the younger folks who we say their brains aren't quite fully developed yet, they come out
Yeah,
with these nuggets of incredible wisdom,
yeah,
and it just stops in your tracks. Yeah,
yeah. That one
wow.
did for sure. Yeah.
So let's talk about canaries in a coal mine and early warning signs for a CEO who's leading a company well, any company, but let's call it a 50 to 250 person
Mhm.
company. What are the early warning signs that their people architecture is about to break?
I'm not sure how early this is, but the signs that things are not as they need to be is the CEO's quality of life is disappearing. And the reason that it's disappearing is because all of those decisions that are supposed to be distributed, in a complex environment like we're in now, no one person can have the perspective that it takes to understand the complexity of a situation. So now more than ever, the decisions have to be distributed at least across the leadership team, if not even further below that. But in an organization where the systems are not designed the way that they need to be, is all of those decisions are migrating back up to the CEO like they're being pulled by gravity.
Hmm.
So the CEO's quality of life is disappearing because they are becoming the bottleneck, and everybody is turning to them and saying, what do you want us to do? So that's for sure. That is a surefire sign that things are not the way they need to be.
Yeah, I've worked for companies where I've seen that dysfunction. I'm in meetings with, pretty high level senior directors, VPs, and some decisions have to be made. And it's happened to me more than once where those senior people in the meeting actually said the words, I'm not going to tell you what my decision is or what I think we should do because it doesn't matter anyways, because the president is going to decide. And
Yeah.
if that's not a sign of dysfunction,
Yeah, yeah. There's leadership teams that are, full of genuinely capable people, and they function very well as an individual, but they're not able to act as an integrated system under pressure because the system isn't designed to allow them to do that. It's nothing about the leaders themselves, it's nothing about the CEO themselves, it's the way the system is designed. It's designed for efficiency, it's not designed for complexity. And so, those systems that were supposed to solve problems become the problem that they were supposed to prevent. Yeah.
so framed a different way, very often we have companies who are focused on growth and speed, which usually means that employee well-being is going to be taking the hit somewhere somehow. Any perspective on how to design a system where you can actually accelerate hiring, accelerate output, and not burn the entire team to the ground?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, not burning the team to the ground has to be one of the criteria that's considered in the design.
Hopefully.
Like, yeah, I mean, you can't sort of say, oh darn, and just sort of toss them under the bus. But in an efficiency designed system, that is the natural thing to do. You just kind of, well, they can handle it for a couple of months, and then a couple of months becomes 6 months, and then a year, and then people start to realize, okay, this is never going to get better, and your best people start to walk out the door. So, you know, what is needed now is set of people systems that are designed from the start for ambiguity, for constraint, for unrelenting pressure. And what that means is there's got to be systems that have flexibility designed into them. Your culture needs to be architected so that people are not just um, able to adapt, but they're change ready, and they're expecting it, and they're skilled at navigating change. There's a lot of cultures out there where stability, there's I don't know if you're familiar with the term polarity, but it's a term that was coined by Barry Johnson back in the 1990s, and he said a polarity is a problem that can't be solved. It has two interdependent parts, one that gives rise to the other. So a good one is structure and flexibility. And so the reason it can't be solved is because it's always a balance that has to be struck between those two ends of the pole. And what happens is people start to think of a polarity as a problem instead of a polarity. So they solve it and they come down on the side of structure so that efficiency is optimized. But then, they move into like hyper growth, or they move into, a very disruptive environment where, things are changing very rapidly. Now, all of a sudden, all that structure that got designed in to the process is now impeding what needs to happen. And so, if you're familiar with polarities, you recognize in that moment, oh, there's a rebalance that needs to happen here. And then there's a bunch of polarity maps that you can use to make sure that you're getting the benefits of both sides of the poles and minimizing the negatives. And that, I think, is a really important piece of the culture that needs to be embedded in any organization that is dealing with a lot of complexity and a lot of change. And a lot of organizations aren't familiar with that.
And speaking of organizations not familiar with that, and maybe in particular the CEO, the chief bottle washer,
Uh-huh.
who is maybe not just not aware of that, but also in total denial that the problem is because of them. And they say to you, "Oh, Pamela, I need your help. We have a big communication problem here with the people," or "We seem to have a hiring problem because people aren't staying for very long. There's a lot of churn." How do
Yeah.
you how do you deal with a CEO like that and try
Yeah.
to make them understand that actually the problem is them?
Well, the growth of any organization is going to be capped by the leadership capability at the top. That is just like a law of physics, if you will. And so for any CEO who is interested in growing their organization, they have to recognize that if they want to grow, then their leadership needs to grow along with it. All you have to do is think of a founder who's had an organization for like 25 years, and what has happened is the organization has grown, and then, oh dear, now it goes back to here. And you sort of end up with a growth curve that looks like this, where the leader is getting outside their comfort zone because they've never led an organization with that many people before. And so they find a way to shrink it back down, right? None of that is conscious. But all you have to do is go look for a revenue chart. And then as soon as you see that, you can say, look, you're capping the capabilities of the organization. And so there's nothing wrong with wanting to have an organization at a certain size. But then you're not a growth company. Just recognizing that you're not a growth company, sometimes that's the solution is, hey, you're happiest running an organization at 150 people, which is great, right? So that's the conversation to be had there. On the other hand, there's someone who didn't realize that that was what was going on. And so, they come to you with a problem and you say, oh, okay, so you've got a hiring problem. People are leaving. Okay. What are those individuals saying when they're leaving the company? and you start to sort of dig into what is going on beneath the surface. And, 360s are super great at helping leaders look at the data and understand the impact that they're having. So in a lot of cases, a 360 is the data that the leader needs, and it's sometimes difficult to confront. And you never know how they're going to react. Sometimes they'll go, "Oh, okay, so here I am. I'm 150 people, and I'm going to stay that way." Great. Yeah, you don't need me.
Right. Right, because there's no problem.
Right. There's no problem. Exactly. Yeah. So glad that I could provide that clarity and, and moving on. But if somebody wants to go to 250 people, then okay, let's start talking about the leadership growth that you need to undertake. And I feel strongly enough about it that I've actually written a book called The Achievement Ceiling. And the subtitle is The Hidden Developmental Work Behind Every Leadership Breakthrough. So I'm looking forward to that publishing at the end of this year. And I think I'm hoping at least that it will be of significant help to leaders who are interested in taking their leadership to the next level.
Well, congrats on that. First of all, it's a
Thank
big
you.
deal to write a book these days. How long did it take you to
Yeah.
write it?
4 years.
Oh, that's super long. Clearly, you did not use AI to help you write it.
No, no, I did not.
As during those 4 years, you saw the emergence of AI. At some point, did you say to yourself, maybe I can speed this up a little bit?
Actually, what AI has been super for has been chapter headings and titles. Yeah, apparently I really am terrible at both.
Hmm. And AI is really good at
It's
both,
really good at it.
right in
Yes.
AI's wheelhouse. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. That's worked really well.
So the book is around an idea that leaders eventually hit a stage where the very skills that made them successful from the beginning up to where they've gotten to
Yeah.
has now flipped. They've kind of squeezed all the juice out of that lemon, and now it's starting to rot. And there's no more juice. It's not going to let them keep going. So how does more skills or more training, which is the obvious thought of, oh, I need, I don't know how to do this. Let me go get training. Let me go talk
Right.
to other entrepreneurs
Right.
who've done this. Let me go get more skills. But you say that's actually the wrong answer for a leader who feels stuck there.
It's true. It is the wrong answer. And you beautifully articulated, I will slip you a 20 later, Robert. You beautifully articulated
Right.
what I say in the book, and
Excellent.
that is like effort is not going to make this better, right? So people are looking and they're seeing, okay, I'm up against the edge of what this capability can provide. And it's not satisfying anymore to be operating the way that I am. And I can see glimpses of a different way to operate. But this way of operating that I've always been using has been so successful. I can't imagine moving away from it. And so what this book does is it says, okay, you do have a choice. You can step back and, you're going to get exactly what you've been getting. And if you're okay with that, that's great. And if you are interested in moving forward, let me map out the terrain for you, because there's groups of researchers over the past 50 years who have mapped out the stages of development for adults. And it's now very, very well known. And my own experience when I came across this model, I was 45 and, very much exploring the edges of, my own success. And I was exposed to this model and I was like, holy smokes, now I can see why things that made sense 10 years ago, I don't think that way anymore. And I can see I'm totally up against where I should be. And wow, look at all this ground that I have to take now, as far as development is concerned, and how much further development I can do as a leader. And I've spent the last, I don't want to tell you how many years, moving along that developmental pathway. And the leadership that I provide, I mean, I get wonderful feedback from people, saying, like last week, I was talking with somebody who used to work for me, and she said, "Oh, Pamela, you were the best boss I ever had." And just makes you feel so good. So, yeah, there's lots of ground in front of you if you're bumping up against that edge. And if you want to know what it looks like, join subscribe to my Substack. It's the achievement ceiling, and it's giving information while I lead up to the publication of the book.
All right. Subscribe to Pamela's Substack. Look out for the book and follow and like this podcast. We'll get it all in there.
There you go.
Go do it, people. Show us a little love.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's talk about your journey from the corporate world to the fractional world and what
Mhm.
that was like. What
Yeah.
was the moment that made you decide, I'm done with corporate 9 to 5, so to speak, world. I'm heading over to the fractional side of
Mm.
things.
I wish I could tell you a story where, it was all up to me, and it really wasn't. So a couple of years ago, my 93-year-old aunt, who I had been involved in providing care for, um, opted to take MAID. She had congestive heart failure. She was 93. And she was the older sister of my dad, and my dad was 89, and he was really far down an Alzheimer's path. And so before she did MAID, she had a conversation with my dad that my cousin arranged and said that he had been a good brother. And my cousin said that the message got through to my dad, which I was not at all clear would, because, he saw a tear go down my dad's face, right? And I actually hadn't planned to tell him because I wasn't even sure he was going to get it, right? He was that far down. And 3 weeks to the day after she passed, he passed. And I told my cousin that was the last good deed my aunt ever did, just giving, like, she gave my dad, permission, if that's a thing. And it was an unbelievable lifting of a burden to have both of them gone. And in between those two events, my boss sat me down and said, Pamela, I think we have two different visions for the company. And he was absolutely spot on. He was absolutely right. We diverged in a couple of important ways. And his timing was terrible, but he was, spot on. And so over the course of the next couple of months, we started talking about what a separation from the company would look like. And he said, Pamela, I really want to help you go out into business on your own. He said, I think you're fantastic. I've got a lot of respect for you. You've done so much for this company, and I think you could do the same thing for a lot of other organizations out there. And so he was my first client, and I worked with them half time. And he paid 100% of my salary while I worked 50% of the time, which was incredibly generous and quite remarkable. And he also talked to his friends, about what my capabilities were and so on and so forth. And, a couple of days after my dad passed away, I was sitting waiting for the ferry, which those of us in BC are very familiar with. And I was sitting there thinking, in the span of 3 weeks, the universe has cleared more responsibility off of my plate than I've literally had in decades. My oldest son is 40. So that's a lot of decades. With my aunt gone and my dad gone and, the job changing, I was like, wow, this is my time. And so I just threw myself into it because, how much fun is it to go out and have, set your own schedule and have your own clients and be able to make a difference in a bunch of different organizations. So that's what prompted the journey. I know that at a certain point in time, I would have probably sat down and had that same conversation with him. But at the time that he brought it up, I was a little distracted with these other events that were going on. So I'm very grateful to him for doing that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's one of the saddest, happiest, uplifting stories I've heard in a long time. And I can relate personally as well because my mom is suffering from dementia and my dad in later stages of Parkinson's was suffering from that as well. And it sure ain't pretty. So I totally understand that
hard.
burden, unfortunately. We can't end this conversation without touching on AI. We touched on it a little bit, but
Yeah.
AI is changing everything everywhere,
Yes.
and AI adoption is one of your focus areas, as I believe you call it organizational readiness
Yeah.
challenge is
Yeah.
what it is, rather than a technology implementation. So talk to us about that, how you approach AI and how companies can successfully get AI into the fabric of the culture of the company.
Right. Yeah. So we're fortunate now because we're a couple of years in. And so there's a number of organizations that have been successful and are sharing, sort of what has worked for them. And so so first of all, I took a 3-month program related to AI, kind of digging in well past, hey, could you summarize this email for me? And I use it very much as a thinking partner. And in the conversations that I've been having with organizations that are implementing AI, there's a real fear that needs to be dealt with. People are worried that their jobs are going to be eliminated. So you have to address that fear. And there's a phrase that I keep using of nobody gets left behind. So everybody is going to adopt at a different pace, and that has to be okay, as long as adoption occurs. It just, if somebody takes longer than everybody else to get there, that's totally fine, as long as they get there. And the managers actually are the linchpin for AI adoption. And as far as I'm concerned, AI adoption is not so much a technology change as you suggested. It is really more of a change management thing. It is making sure that people are moved through that process. And that very, very much resides within the people area. And having that partnership between the IT group and the people group is essential. So getting managers on board and getting them to be having conversations, like when I manage a team, one of the questions that I ask them in our status meetings is, how have you used AI, since we last talked? And, we talk through, and I don't care whether it was a total and complete failure. Great, you learned something, right?
Right.
Or whether it was something that worked really well, but getting people to start thinking about how can I use AI, and then sharing successes and failures so that other people don't have to go through the same, trial and error. Having managers have conversations with people about, okay, let's look at the processes that we're responsible for as a team, and what are some of what's some of the, for lack of a better word, grunt work that really nobody wants to do. And, how can we separate that out into a process that AI can manage so that you guys can do the more, creative, exciting stuff with the help of AI, perhaps as a thinking partner, for example. And so I think that top down, there has to be a governance piece, and that needs to be in place first. But then after that, it really needs to be a bottom up where people are redesigning their own work, and finding ways to create efficiencies through AI without giving up accuracy. As we all know, AI, as smart as it is, can certainly make mistakes. So there always has to be that human oversight.
Yeah, it's really interesting how things are shaping up. As you said, now we're a couple of years into it, and we're starting to better understand what works, what doesn't, and what the realities are. And there's a lot of buzz out there about,
Yeah.
layers of jobs being lost and higher unemployment and all that fun stuff. But I'm reading the latest stats that are showing that actually that's not what's happening. Yes, there are jobs being lost, but there's also being jobs created. So the net effect is not really job losses. It's staying pretty close to even, and it's just people shifting into new roles, just as has happened with any other big technology shift throughout the centuries.
And it's hitting people unevenly. So,
Hmm.
I've got kids who, are entering the workforce. And, people who are in entry level positions, the entry level positions are not the same Yeah, I was talking with somebody at PwC, and they were saying, yeah, so what our associates used to do when they first started was they would write reports, and then the supervisor would review the reports, and then, they would give feedback, right? And so the associates would do that for a couple of years, and then move into the supervisor position. But with AI is writing those reports, and so now what we do is we're having the entry level people they're working one level up. So they're now reviewing the reports of the AI, because AI has no idea what's important. And so what PwC at the time that I was talking to them, which was probably over a year ago now, they're saying, what we're struggling with is, how do we teach people the kind of judgment that comes with experience? And so that, I think, is the real challenge, is how do we rejigger the entry level positions so that people can, work one level up and gain the experience that they need, while learning judgment and discernment, in a new way, because the old way's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you hit the nail on the head. In my view, that's the big challenge right now, is exactly that. And we'll figure it out, as we
We
always
will.
do. As a
Yep.
society, we just
Yep.
figure it out.
There's a lot of smart people out there.
Yep. Yep. There are. There are.
Yeah.
Pamela, great conversation we had today. We covered a lot of bases. Wrap it up with our final question. If you could put one message on a billboard for millions of fractionals and business leaders to see as they drive by it on the highway of life every single day, what would that one message be?
In this moment in time, Robert, that message would be, your people systems were designed for efficiency, and it's no longer an efficiency run environment. They need to be redesigned, and they need to be redesigned to be able to support the complexity and the ambiguity that is our new reality.
Okay, so we're going to find a tall building wall to put all of that on. I'm not sure to fit on the billboard, but that's good. So the people system that you had that was designed for efficiency is no longer
Is now the problem.
is now the problem.
Yeah,
Or it could be distilled down to, that solution is now the problem.
that's right. There you
All
go.
right. Pamela, we will leave it at that. Thank you again so much for sharing with us today here on the Fractional Pros Canada podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Robert.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. If you're a fractional professional based in Canada, we'd love to have you join us in the Fractional Pros Canada Facebook group, the home for Canada's fractional community. It's where Canadian fractional executives connect, share insights, and help each other succeed. Until next time, I'm Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO. May your impact be full-time, even if your hours are fractional.